You made it out of the spawn area in DayZ, survived moving inland, and now you find yourself deep into the map. Any mistake here could be fatal. With the stakes higher than ever, the most important skill now is your composure. So in this guide we're gonna talk about trade-offs, simplicity, staying calm under pressure, and death. Welcome to the endgame in DayZ. The deeper you get into DayZ, the more the game becomes about trade-offs. Of course we want better weapons, better armor and better equipment, but almost every upgrade in DayZ comes with some sort of cost attached to it. A larger backpack lets you carry more supplies, but also makes you easier to spot. Sturdier boots last longer, but they make it harder to move quietly. And sometimes one upgrade creates another problem entirely. You might finally find a plate carrier, only to realize you don't have pouches for it yet. So now you suddenly have less inventory space than before. Or maybe you find a powerful rifle, but magazines are much harder to come by than what you were using. That's why there really is no best loadout in DayZ. A setup that works perfectly for one player might be terrible for another. And even for the same player, the best choice depends heavily on the situation. If you're moving carefully through forests as a solo player, you might value stamina and stealth much more than raw protection. But if you're planning to push military areas or fight aggressively, heavy armor might suddenly become worth the trade-off. So instead of a list of weapons and gear, I'm gonna give you something else. Something to think about. The important thing is not finding the perfect loadout, but understanding the advantages and disadvantages of the choices you make and committing to them. If every encounter, location or situation forces you to rethink your equipment and priorities, you're creating unnecessary complexity for yourself. And that's where simplicity starts becoming valuable. Complexity gets you killed in DayZ more often than you realize. A lot of players carry far more than they actually need. Not because they have a plan for it, but because it might become useful later. You start carrying all sorts of ammunition, just in case you eventually find a certain weapon. Or maybe you carry 3 guns at the same time because you cannot decide which one to leave behind. All of that adds complexity. Your stamina suffers and simple tasks start taking much longer than they should. I've nearly died numerous times because I was triple carrying weapons, had to drop one on the ground to fight an infected, and then took way too long searching through the grass for the gun I dropped. If you're familiar with hiking or camping, you might know the phrase, "Don't pack your fears." Going for a hike, it's tempting to fill your backpack with items you might need in a very specific scenario. But eventually, you'll end up carrying a huge amount of stuff you rarely ever use. I've caught myself doing that exact thing in video games ever since I was a kid. Back when I used to play mainly role-playing games, I always saved powerful potions for the moment I'd really need them, and most of the time I finished the entire game without ever using them. In DayZ, it's easy to fall into the same mindset. Another stack of ammo, another repair kit, a spare knife, just in case. How often have you stood over a dead player or next to a car, dragging items around your inventory for a good minute because everything is such a mess? Every extra second you spend sorting through clutter is another second you're vulnerable. That's why it helps to create simple systems for yourself. Whenever there's a quiet moment in the game, while cooking, waiting for a teammate, or sitting out a storm, take a minute to organize your inventory. Keep your most important items easy to access. Know where your medical supplies are, know where your ammunition is. When things suddenly escalate, you don't want to search through a backpack full of random stuff while panicking. Staying organized helps you to make decisions faster, especially when it matters most. DayZ becomes a very different game when you finally have something to lose. Gear fear is one of the most powerful psychological tricks the game plays on you. Almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, you become so worried about dying and losing your progress that you start making worse decisions because of it. And in a game like DayZ, that reaction is completely understandable. You could spend hours without ever seeing another player. Then suddenly, you hear footsteps in the building next to you. Your heart rate immediately goes up, your breathing changes, and your mind instantly jumps to, if this goes wrong, I lose everything. While that might be true, it's not a mindset that helps you in that moment. You see, when I first got my driver's license, I was very anxious about driving. Every time I got into a car, I kept thinking, if I crash, I could die. And constantly thinking that way didn't make me a better driver. It made me more nervous, more tense, and less focused. DayZ works the same way. One thing that helps me a lot with this is simply being aware of what's happening in my own head. I notice myself getting tense, breathing quicker, rushing thoughts, and once I recognize that, I can start redirecting my attention towards more practical thoughts instead. How likely is it that they know I'm here? What's the next logical place they might move to? Which angles am I exposed from right now? Focusing on practical information helps to take my attention away from, oh god, I don't want to die. Another thing that helps is physically slowing yourself down. After hearing shots or footsteps, there's often a huge urge to immediately peek windows, sprint, reposition, or push aggressively. But many bad decisions in DayZ happen during those first few seconds of panic. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop moving for a moment. Listen, think, assess the situation. A calm player with decent information is far more dangerous than a panicked player relying on reflexes. And lastly, I try to mentally take a step back from the game itself. DayZ is extremely immersive, and that's part of what makes it so good. But at the end of the day, it's still just a game. If I die, nothing in the real world actually changes. I only lose virtual gear that I can eventually get back again. That is why learning to deal with death is such an important part of DayZ. No character in DayZ survives forever. Even the most experienced players eventually end up back on the coast. The tagline for DayZ is, "This is your story," and that's exactly how I try to approach every new life. Not as permanent progress, but as a unique character with their own journey, encounters, victories, mistakes, and eventually, death. Some of my characters survived for weeks, even months, only to disappear because of a server wipe. Those aren't the characters I remember most. The memorable ones are the characters that survived the coast, made allies, got into fights, barely escaped dangerous situations, and eventually died in some chaotic firefight at Tissy or Northwest Airfield. Those stories actually feel complete, and strangely enough, dying in DayZ can even feel like some sort of relief. The gear fear is gone, and all the pressure you build up around that character suddenly disappears with it. That's why I think it helps to accept, even embrace death as part of the experience, instead of treating it like failure. Not only does it help you stay calmer during stressful situations, it also stops you from becoming overly attached to gear and progress. And whenever I do die, I try not to immediately quit the game afterwards. Even if it's only for 10 minutes, I'd like to start a new character right away. Because it reminds me that DayZ has always been about the journey, not the gear. Within minutes, you're already making decisions again. Searching houses, finding loot, starting over. And before long, another story begins. So the deeper you get into DayZ, the more survival becomes a mental game. Understand the trade-offs, keep things simple, stay composed under pressure, and don't be afraid to lose it all. Hey, if you enjoyed this guide, consider subscribing to the channel for more videos about survival, strategy, and psychology in DayZ. Thanks for watching, see you in the next run.